Back in here, we've got Sophie Rauszer, who is with us. She was with us 2 weeks ago. You were campaigning for Jean-Luc Mélenchon on the hard left, I suppose you would call it. 7 million people.
Just left.
Just left. You would say left, would you? Not hard left. Okay, well, 7 million people voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Do you get a feeling for how they voted today?
Well, I think the figures you were saying earlier are clearly showing that, in fact, Marine Le Pen is not gaining a lot, from the first turn to the second turn. She's gaining 12 points, meaning that it's mostly François Fillon's voters that drifted towards her, whereas the abstention and the blank vote is very high. In fact, I think it hasn't been so high since 1969 or something like that. So that could be a sign of our voters, because I think a lot of people have voted for Macron to kick out Marine Le Pen, clearly. But there's also a big part of our population that is a bit apathetic, towards Macron's program. So that's also a sign, a signal. I mean, there is a message, a political message there, that will mean that the first day of Mr. Macron, the first day his ability to govern will be challenged. And we have parliamentary elections.
Of course, coming up in June.
Yep. I'm running as candidate for Benelux, for example, and in that election, well, our duty, us, for the France Insoumise candidate, will be to also bring some of the challenges that were completely absent from this campaign. For example, environmental issues. Not a single word on Wednesday final debates. It's the biggest threat upon this planet. Not a single word. When
you put your supporters, the 7 million people that voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, with those of Marine Le Pen and some of the other fringe candidates, nearly 50% of French people have voted for a Eurosceptic candidate. There is a lot of celebration in Brussels tonight that Mr. Macron has won, but that is also tinged with the reality that a good many people here in France have serious reservations about the European Union project.
Well, it's a fact. I mean, since 2005 already, when the French people have voted against the constitutional treaty, and that vote in 2005, remember, it was also put forward, supported by a big share of the left parties, including Jean-Luc Mélenchon already at the time. So, I mean, being Eurosceptic, I understand this expression, and especially I see it especially in British newspaper, but it doesn't have the same. Who is a Eurosceptic? Somebody who has some kind of critical regard to what's happening in Europe. I mean, this is I think it's pretty healthy, considering what's happening. I'm afraid, on the other hand, that Macron will absolutely change nothing in Europe, if something, make things worst, actually, because for example, first meeting with Madame Merkel, what will he say to her? I mean, I'm pretty, to say things very clearly, I'm afraid he's going to be a new lapdog of Madame Merkel.
Just very quickly, how many seats do you expect to win in the upcoming elections, and would your party work with Emmanuel Macron on some of his economic programme?
Well, it's not a lottery, so I'm not going to give you figures. It's clearly too soon to say. But we'll be in all 577 constituencies for sure. And no, we will not be able to, especially not on the economy program, because maybe as you've seen, one of the first announcements of Mr. Macron was to defend a new labor reform done by decree. So not asking the parliament position and vote and debate.
Push it through.
And push it through.
Okay.
Which was the very reason why Emmanuel Macron was ejected. Okay,
Sophie, for the moment, let's quickly go to the Marine Le Pen camp in the Bois de Vincennes. James Reynolds is there for us. James, so Marine Le Pen conceding quite early this evening on those projections. They are overwhelming, of course, in favour of Emmanuel Macron. What will the Front National make of the result?
I think they'll have to look at it in the long term. They'll have to see that they have to measure their own progress election by election, decade by decade. They started off in 1974 with 0.74% of the vote. I think they'll compare this to the experience in 2002 when Jean-Marie Le Pen got just under 18% of the vote. It looks like Marine Le Pen has by and large doubled her father's vote. in 2002. That is a source of optimism for them, but I think there will be disappointment that they didn't reach 40% of the vote. I don't think that they can quite say tonight that they are one step away from winning the next election. There's clearly a lot more work to be done to persuade the other part of France that this party is electable.
And of course, James, they will go on, as we've just been talking to Sophie about, they will go on to the parliamentary elections in January in fairly healthy form, won't they? They will want to take quite a number of seats in the parliament.
Yes, and they start from a meagre base. They have 2 MPs out of 577 in the National Assembly. So in some ways, almost the only way for them is up. But it does give you a sense of the amount of work that Marine Le Pen has to do in order to make sure that her force, the Front National becomes the opposition force she wants it to become. You can't really say you're the main opposition party if you've only got 2 MPs.
Yeah, just looking at some of the other polls, James, as we talk to you, we've got one from France Television, pretty similar to the one that we've been showing you from Cantar Public, 65% for Mr. Macron and 34% for Madame Le Pen. And we've also got another one from BFM Television that had Mr. Macron on 65.9%. and Madame Le Pen on 34.1%. So they're all pretty much of a muchness. They have Mr. Macron well over 20 points ahead of Marine Le Pen. And we were saying, James, that really the Front National would have wanted to hit 40%, but when you compare the 11 million votes that the Front National got in this round with the 4.8 her father got back in 2002, it does show how the party is performing over the long term.
And I think that's their point. They are a movement which measures their progress in decades, not single elections. They started at 0.74%, they got up to 18% in 2002, now they're up to what, the mid-30s. It's not as much as they would have wanted this time around, but they'll say, look at the long-term trajectory, look at how they are increasing their vote, and they will also, I think, be pleased by the amount of legitimacy they've had. Bear in mind, for years theirs was a fringe movement. A lot of parts of France boycotted them, ignored them. I think with 35% of the vote now, they'll feel that they can no longer be ignored. The question is whether or not Marine Le Pen can turn to her own supporters now and say, we're one step away from winning the next election. It's hard to think that someone who got 35% of the vote can really say that.
Okay, James Reynolds for the moment. Thank you very much. Dominique, I was just talking about the long game for the Front National. Are you slightly in disagreement with that? You don't think that there is a pattern building here for the Front National?
Well, it may be the peak of their political life. It all depends what happens within the next 5 years. If there are results, if growth returns, if unemployment comes down, they will do less in 5 years from now. It's the responsibility of Emmanuel Macron. So from that standpoint, it gives us an understanding of what happened tonight. Hope prevailed over anger with a little bit of help of fear, because a lot of people voted for Macron because they were scared, they got scared at the very end of Marine Le Pen revealing the old nature of a party in the debate.
But she has, some would say, detoxified the brand somewhat. She's got rid of some of the anti-Semitism, she's got some of the nastier elements of the party. Some would say they're still there in the DNA of the party, but it's become an electable force. I mean, if you look at what happened in 2002, the left grabbed its nose and it voted for Jacques Chirac, even though they didn't particularly like him. This time, not as many people feel inclined to vote against her.
That is true, but the situation has greatly changed. But I'm not sure the DNA of the National Front has changed. In fact, in the debate, she was her father. There was a brutality, a rusticity that destroyed all the efforts she made during the last 5 years to appear more acceptable.
The same could be true of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Maybe this is the high point for him. He's getting on. He performed brilliantly in the election, took 7 million votes, but what happens to the movement over the next 5 years?
Well, there's a big difference also with Marine Le Pen, is that we will enter the National Assembly for the first time in reality. So we will be, for the first time in a position able to draft new laws and so on. So I think it's fairly different. Of course, Jean-Luc Mélenchon is not an eternal man, and when his time will come, but we have the new generation ready, as you might have seen also in the figures. We are the third political party in terms of youth support. So the new generation is there, and the future stands with us in a way. I mean, it's a factual stance. And to just on what he was saying, I mean, the fact that it's for the Front National, it's still in their DNA to be fascist. The very fact that you have as a general secretary someone like Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who said that the gas chamber was like Jean-Marie Le Pen, really, a gas chamber was like some kind of detail of the history, not really sure it existed or something like that. I mean, it's a proof that behind there it still exists, and now all these internal divisions that Marine Le Pen was able to federate all these people, especially to support Florian Philippot. Now all the internal division will surface.
It won't suffice, though, will it, Dominique, for Mr. Macron to be more of the same, because she got well over 10,000 villages and towns with town halls around the country voted for the far right, for something different.
Well, it means there is a level of despair and anger that is there, that has been expressed in the election. And the problem for Emmanuel Macron as the new president is to answer, to find answers to that anger and that despair.
And that is pretty much about jobs, isn't it? 5 million French people without a job, 1 in 4 young people under the age of 25 without a full-time job. It's about getting people into employment.
It starts with job, but it goes much deeper. It requires consideration, a sense of fraternity, a meaning that the state takes care of these people, realize they exist. They are not in a kind of bulb above them and far from them.
I agree with you on this point. The only disagreement we have is that I don't believe that Mr. Macron represents that change in reality. He was going to apply the old same recipe, and the deregulation program, the agenda that he has, in terms of, especially in terms of economy and labor reform, will be very violent to people. I mean, I think it's just a matter of weeks, really, to see like huge mobilization. Okay, his first few reforms will be good PR, as he's always doing, a good communication campaign. He will change slightly his government, the government with new faces, a lot of new faces, a lot of women and so on. And then we will start the legislative election, we will start the big business.
When he was the economy minister, he brought something in called the Macron law, which was going to liberalise certain sectors of the French economy, and people came out in their thousands to block it, and he was forced to water it down. What is going to be different when he brings out his liberalising agenda in the months ahead?
He's the president now. He has been elected with a sizable majority. He has been carried to power by a sense of elation, of hope of many, fear and despair of others, and this is where we disagree fundamentally. I think he can succeed, and I hope deeply for my country, without any ideological vision, that he will succeed, that it's not a matter of principle or whatever. He can do it because other countries in Europe have done it.
Is it about him doing it, though, or is it about the French accepting change? Because spending, for instance, government spending in this country has risen over the last 10 years from 51, I think, to 57%. The public sector is bloated, everybody knows that. And the sort of reforms that he's putting forward were a pale imitation of the reforms that François Fillon.
Very neoliberal policies across Europe, and especially coming from a German vision that is understandable to some extent. It's understandable for them. But you know, when you're talking about public services, I mean, we have a massive regeneration of our country. We need more employment. We need more we need more jobs in public services. We need more schools. We need more hospitals. We don't need less and less and less. more spending it will bring more
You're the highest
revenue.
spenders in the world.
It will bring more revenue in the end. But if you keep going, what Macron wants to do is precisely what Mr. Hollande has been doing. Did you see the result? For which result? We have more unemployment. Not only unemployment, we have 9 million poor people in this country, France. Do you imagine that? So it's the same. The same goes for Germany, really. Like, why do you have AfD, anti-European movement so high now? Because Madame Merkel is imposing again a recipe that does not work.
Dominique's edging to get in. Go on, very quickly.
Just to reply to you on one point, the AfD, the extreme right in Germany, is decreasing significantly. There is a macromania impact taking place in Germany, as there is one in Italy with the rebirth of Matteo Renzi. So from that standpoint, I think Matteo Renzi is the right middle ground. Fillon was too extreme, too brutal in his approach. But what he wants to do, he can do it by doing it moderately.
We're going to come back to this. There's plenty more to discuss. Matteo Renzi, incidentally, didn't get on too well, even though he was the great pretender in Italy.